And we're live. Welcome back to another episode of the Wheelie Podcast, everyone, where we talk about electric bike news and everything that's the latest in the two-wheeled world. I'm your host, Micah Toll, and I'm joined again by Electrek's Seth Weintraub, who I believe is out in LA. How's it going, Seth?
Good. Actually, a really interesting e-bike scene out here that has changed since even in the last year. We're staying in Santa Monica, and all along the beach, e-bikes are everywhere. Even like the bike rental places, mostly are renting e-bikes. And then also they have the LA Metro bikes, which is kind of like the Velibes in Paris or the city bikes in New York. Um, have gone electric, and they have a Bosch drivetrain system, which is really nice, obviously. But the bike batteries are off to the side, off the the, the rear wheel, which obviously seems like an afterthought. I think we've seen this in another uh, a bike factor or another city bike kind of thing. So yesterday my son and I rented a couple of Metro bikes, and my other son, who's a big skateboarder, kind of just rode alongside along the beach, holding on to the battery, which is off the side of the rear wheel.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, it was a fun way to get around, and like LA, everybody hates driving because you're stuck in traffic, and you know, along the bike paths and stuff like that, you're much better off, and it's obviously much quicker with an e-bike. So really enjoying the e-bike scene here in LA.
Absolutely, yeah. So you're there probably what once a year at least. How have you seen it change over the last few years, or when did e-bikes really start to become like a mass there?
Well, I usually go to the LA Auto Show, and then catch a little USC football after that, and other stuff. That's a little bit in the fall. It's a little bit more, I would say, a little bit more summertime now, but not really. It's still a little chilly here. Um, but it's like every step of the way, it's a big step in e-bikes, and usually with the LA Auto Show, that's downtown. I stay downtown. This time I'm in Santa Monica, so you're seeing a lot more beach people, but you can tell that these aren't just like people with like the off e-bike. These are people like commuting to work. These are people like getting from one place to another. They've got their kids on their bikes. It's kind of like the minivan use case. And it's happening a lot. I don't know if it's reducing traffic, but I know the people that are on e-bikes are not you know dealing with traffic, or at least not as much. So it's definitely a cool thing, and we're seeing like it's not just like generic e-bikes. We're seeing Super 73s um, everywhere. Juiced. I saw an aerial rider, like this like 90-year-old guy on an aerial rider yesterday. It was crazy. Um, just just a plethora of bikes everywhere. Even like a lot of high end, like Specialized and Trek e-bikes around as well. So really heartening to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like, the US has always been sort of a few years behind Europe, but now we're getting to that tipping point where each time I go to a new city, we're just seeing like huge amounts of e-bikes moving around. In some places, almost more. Sometimes I feel like I see even more than pedal bikes in some cities.
Yeah, I think that's the case here too. Maybe that's what kind of stuck out to me is like by default, bikes were e-bikes, not just the off one or two here or there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we have so many new e-bikes coming out. It feels like every week or so, there's probably two or three unveilings. So it makes sense that with this rate of new e-bikes, that it's just going to really start taking off. And if anything, I think even this week, we've got several new electric bikes of different types that have been unveiled. I know we're going to be talking about some new Super 73 models, also some higher power things from SONDORS and Luna. So there's definitely a lot of new stuff out there. It feels like every week in the e-bike space. But where are we going to start off with this week, Seth?
Yeah. So local, and I hope to talk to Luna's Erik either today or tomorrow. Was kind of hoping to get over there before today's podcast, but they launched a Sur-Ron killer, Talaria. I think that's how you pronounce it. Sting electric motorbike with 50% more power.
Yeah, this thing looks pretty wild. I have not ridden one yet. From what I understand, it's very similar feeling to a Sur-Ron. which a lot of us have tried before. Sur-Ron's been around for many years, and they're kind of like the brand name when it comes to these sort of off-road, a bit enduro style light trail bikes. But the Talaria here, it's a significant upgrade, and this is the newest model of the Sting. I think it's the Sting R, and so it's got 50% more power than the Sur-Ron X. It also has about 20% more battery capacity. It's got larger brakes, which actually Lunicycle used to have to actually upgrade the brakes on the Sur-Ron when it would come in to what they felt were safe and by brakes that would be good as a standard standard equipment on these things. But the Talaria just comes with 230 millimeter, I think 2.3 millimeter thick rotors, which are quite thick,
Hmm.
quad piston brakes, and it's just a significant upgrade in many ways. Even the gearbox is, instead of being a belt reduction, which a lot of people would have problems with broken belts, or you'd have to get in there and replace a belt if it tore. This one has a gearbox. So the downside is that you have to change the oil every 3,000 miles, which if you're riding this off road, you probably don't do 3,000 miles that often. But the upside is that there's nothing really to wear down or break. Those gears should last for a really long time, as long as you're changing your oil at the maintenance cycle, which is pretty far. So there's a lot to like here in what's basically a Sur-Ron style vehicle, but with some significant upgrades. And I think the cherry on top here is the price. It's only 150 bucks more expensive than the Sur-Ron X, at about 4,500 bucks. So you're paying almost the same thing, but you're getting a lot more in many cases. So I mean, this really does feel like a Sur-Ron killer to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a Sur-Ron. I think if you're riding one around, people will probably think you're on a Sur-Ron. And from what I've been seeing online, this is kind of like the update that Sur-Ron should have done themselves. They've kind of been sitting on that same design for a number of years now, and obviously there's a big user base out there that um, you know will take advantage of that, especially with aftermarket stuff. And Luna's kind of saying, well, hey, we're going to do the same thing. He didn't come out outright and say it, but when we talked to Erik about this, I kind of got the vibe that he was tired of like Sur-Ron was like Luna basically made Sur-Ron in the U.S. And then now Luna or Sur-Ron is selling through Segway and a bunch of other. I think they're even going direct here. So that's kind of, I don't know. Doesn't seem like a very nice way to treat your best customer. So, and I know Luna had a lot to do with the Talaria specs. This is an upgraded bike from the Talaria had a previous bike, and basically everything was upgraded, and this is very Luna like, all the specs here. So um it's just a very impressive bike. The video that was at the bottom of the um Luna page kind of showed the Sur-Runner, one of the YouTubers, saying like, hey, this is exactly what I would have done with this, the Sur-Ron, a little bit more power, a little bit more range. He says it's quieter. I've with gearboxes, it's always hard to tell. Like, um, but I guess the gear reduction, you don't have as fast a spinning chain, so that's helpful. Um, and everybody I've talked to that has seen the specs or seen the the video has been like, okay, this is serious. And the fact that Luna's doing this, it's kind of signaling, all right, we're not dealing with Sur-Ron so much anymore. They're still going to make aftermarket parts, obviously, but I think this is what they're going to focus on going forward in this space.
Yeah, and like you said, it sounds like Erik and Luna played a pretty big role in sort of advising some of these upgrades, and we're used to seeing Luna bring in bikes and then do a lot of these upgrades themselves. And in this case, they don't really have to do too much to it because it's already pretty upgraded over the previous version, right?
Yeah, I mean this has like a lot of power. It's got a lot of range. It's got the big brakes. Like those are the things that Luna really sometimes talks about. I guess they could do a belt drive on here. But and Luna has said like, hey, we're going to do some upgrades. this summer we'll have some new stuff, and they're already selling out of them. So on their Facebook account, they had this like array of boxes that were going out. So it's happening. They're definitely doing this thing. So and it's also interesting. Another LA company, SONDORS, has got the MetaBeast, which is another 50 mile per hour off road bike. I think that might be a little bit bigger, a little bit more full sized. But it's just interesting to see this space like really blowing up right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think you'll be able to get on one of these in the next couple days while you're out there?
I mean, I'm hoping today. We'll see what happens. Eric's such a nice guy. He invited me out to his house where I was like, "Hey, my kids are here." He's like, "Oh, you guys should come to my house. We have a space shuttle." And I was like, "What? Like the space shuttle?" So that'll be interesting. We'll see. We'll see.
All right, cool. So everyone, keep a watch on Seth's Twitter account. Maybe we'll see
Yeah.
some riding.
Yep. All right. Moving on a little bit. Super 73 launches Adventure Series e-bikes, kids bikes, and new e-motorcycle details.
Yeah, this was a pretty big announcement from Super 73. So, sort of three things rolled into one. First of all, they announced a new adventure series, which covers all of their different bikes, the Z, which is like the entry level, the S, and then the R and the RX. So, there's a number of different upgrades here. Some of the more obvious ones are the tires and the seats. So, they all get these really aggressive, sort of adventure style tires. There are new longer bench seats on the R and I believe the S as well. Also, the R and the S both have their batteries moved lower, so it drops that center of gravity a good bit. I guess that's not something they could do on the Z based on the design there. And then there are a few other upgrades as well. There's an 8-speed cassette on all of them as standard equipment, since a lot of these bikes come with a single speed right out of the gate because a lot of people aren't pedaling these. And of course, there's a slight bump in the price as well. But all in all, this is a pretty cool upgrade for the kind of people who don't just ride these on the street. People who actually want to get off road, get in the dirt, and treat this like a little sort of light electric dirt bike. So it's cool to see this adventure series added. The next update they rolled out were the kids bikes, which they actually revealed about a year ago, but now they're finally rolling these things out. They're not actually bicycles because they don't have pedals. They're more of a I want to call them a balance bike, but at this point it's more like a mini motorcycle because normally a balance bike you kind of like kick it and you pick your feet up. This one, I think you have to kick it for the first few feet and then you can engage the throttle and you're just riding around like you're on a motorcycle. So I mean, it's effectively like a kid's motorcycle, I want to say, and it comes with a motorcycle price. It's like $1,000, so you better be
Wow.
prepared to, you know, pay motorsport prices for this thing. And then speaking of motorcycles, that's the sort of the third big announcement from Super 73 here, is they gave us more details on their upcoming C1X electric motorcycle, specifically about the charging. And this is pretty big because they are saying that it's going to be the fastest charging electric motorcycle out there. And we've seen fast charging from other brands. We've seen it from Livewire. We've seen it from Energica. But it's kind of surprising to see an electric bicycle company that's new into the motorcycle game come out with ultra fast charging technology. So what they're saying is that they're going to be able to put in, I believe it's 20 to 80%. There it is, 10 to 80% in 15 minutes, which is faster than pretty much anything that exists right now in the electric motorcycle industry. How are they going to do it? It's not entirely clear yet. But once this thing rolls out, which is expected at some point next year, hopefully we get to see sort of how the sausage is made there. Because right now, I mean, they have one prototype. Apparently, it's not working at 100% performance, but they're doing like 25 or 50% limited testing. And so, it's not like a total concept vehicle. They're working on sort of test mules, but this is not a production bike. It's far from it at this point. So right now, it's great to hear about this new technology coming out, but I kind of want to see it on a real bike before I get too excited about it being first released by a bicycle company as opposed to a sort of established motorcycle company. What are your thoughts, Seth?
Yeah, it's surprising. Even in the car space, you don't see 10 to 80% in 15 minutes, unless we're talking about like, in the lab type of results. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there in terms of battery and charging technology. Will it be proprietary? Will it be, the DC fast charging that go to Electrify America or Tesla or something? Kids bike, that's crazy because it seems like a balance bike. Like you go right from balance bike to motorcycle in this case. I guess that's you're building up a audience there of future Super 73 riders. And yeah, like I was saying in LA, these things are everywhere. So glad to see that they're uh, upgrading their off-road stuff. I mean, obviously not a lot of off-road stuff in Los Angeles unless you go up in the hills, but you know, they're Southern California company. I'm sure they're trying these things out everywhere.
Yeah, so the one thing that I'll add, like in defense of these kids' bikes that are basically like balance bike slash motorcycle,
Hmm.
my niece actually, I let her try one that I was reviewing, or I let her kind of review it.
Hmm.
And she's I think 3, so she was still on
Oh wow.
training wheels at the time. And she got on this thing. It took her, like 20, 30 minutes to sort of like get comfortable with it. She started by going downhill and then engaging the throttle. And then after like an hour, she was riding it around like a motorcycle. But then the next day, she got on her training wheel bike, and her dad took the training wheels off, and she just rode it like normal. So
Wow.
it was like a tool that basically taught her to balance at higher speeds. And then she
Yeah.
didn't need training wheels anymore on her pedal bike. So there's like, it sounds kind of like silly, these little electric motorcycles for kids, but as sort of a balance training tool, it actually seems like it works in that one sort of anecdotal story there.
Right. And 3 years old, that's pretty early for biking. I know my kids were really early on bikes, and I think they were like 3 or 4 as well.
Oh, gotta start them young.
Yep. All right, moving on. World's longest range e-bikes. I feel like we've heard that before. Launched by Erik Buell's electric bicycle company.
Yeah, this one it actually probably rivals the title. Sometimes it's like hyperbole, but I think Erik Buell might have this. So, anyone who's not familiar, Erik Buell's kind of a legend in the motorcycle industry. He's got a very storied history of building bikes. He was under Harley for a while after they bought his motorcycle brand, and he's just a highly respected figure that a few years ago expanded into electric bicycles. And so he's got this Fuel brand, which sounds like an odd name, but it's spelled kind of the way Buell is with an F. And these are the 2 latest models that follow up the original Fuel Fluid 1. So the 2 and 3, the 2 is really the higher performance one, and it's got 2 1 kilowatt hour batteries. So 2,000 watt hours, which is one of the highest capacities we've seen on a retail e-bike before. It rivals, I think, the was it the Hyper Scrambler 2 from Juiced? Is that right, Seth?
Yeah, that's around 100. But again, that's, always depends on how much you're putting in and how fast you're going.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, the Hyper Scrambler 2 is more of a moped or like, light motorcycle type of bike, whereas these
Mhm.
are very much commuter style bikes that are designed to be lighter, more efficient, that sort of thing. So with these, I think you're probably going to get a little closer to the actual range that they're stating. The other thing is that these are, I believe, pedal assist only. So you're talking about a bike that's already going to be more efficient because you're pedaling it as opposed to riding it like a motorbike with a throttle. Between the two here, the Fluid 2 and the Fluid 3, the main difference here is the battery that I mentioned, but also the frame style. So the Fluid 3 only has a single 1 kilowatt hour battery, which is still bigger than almost every other e-bike battery out there, and it's also a step through. It uses this new Vallejo mid-drive motor, which is interesting because it has a gearbox built into it, and so that means that you don't need an internally geared hub in the rear if you're using a belt drive like this does. Of course, Eric Buell's not going to build a low end bike, so he's put in a Gates belt drive and a very, very nice mid drive motor here with that built in gearbox. So all told, it's a pretty nice looking bike. I mean, both of these are, especially that Fluid 2 with the double 1 kilowatt hour batteries. they're pretty expensive. I think the 1 kilowatt hour one starts in the high 3,000s, maybe like 36, 3,700. And I think the Fluid 2 starts at about 4,000. And those are even the introductory prices. So the MSRP is going to be a bit higher. They're also launching on Indiegogo, which we always sort of give a disclaimer that, first of all, we don't generally cover Indiegogo or Kickstarter projects unless either we're able to test the product first to make sure it's real, or that it comes from a company that has a history of delivering. In this case, we've tried Fluid bikes before. We know the company is legit and they've been around for years. So, but keep in mind, it is a crowdfunding campaign. And so you're not actually buying a bike. You're sort of funding the production of bikes, and then you're theoretically rewarded with a bike after they produce. So just something to keep in mind. But all in all, I mean, I think that Fuel has done a great job at the design of these bikes and put in some really nice parts. Now it's just a matter of who's going to spend that much money to really get like a super high end car replacing type of bike, as opposed to a lot of riders that really want to, spend 1,500, maybe 2,000 on a in addition to their car type of bike.
Yeah, this is we've always liked the fuel bikes. And you, I think, rode one around in Florida.
Yeah,
Uh,
the original Fluid one.
yeah. Are we gonna see these anytime soon?
Hopefully, I think they have a few that are already in the US that they're going to start doing test rides with. I'm not sure production has started for like the full rollout, but I think they are going to start test rides soon.
Yeah. Just anecdotally, I've talked to a few people who've got the previous fuel bikes and they loved them. I think they do a really good job. You know, top tier components and really good design, and obviously the big batteries, and having two huge batteries, overkill for most people. But if you don't want to run out of battery, you've got a long commute or whatever. Obviously, this is probably your best option out there. So
Yeah, and to me, it's always fun seeing companies that are used to designing much more rugged vehicles. Like a motorcycle is a full motor vehicle. So they come to this with sort of a different mindset than a company that's used to designing bicycles. And so to see a more ruggedized bike, something that has components that are meant to last for years, that is just sort of like the standard way of thinking as opposed to some extra accessory you got to add on. To me, that's always great to see because it just lifts the whole industry up.
yep. And specifically on this motor, have we seen this motor on anything else before?
I haven't seen it, but I'm not as familiar with the Vallejo motors. I think this specific model is pretty new, the one with the built-in gearbox,
Hmm.
but I haven't seen it on anything else.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because it sounds like the internal gears, like your pedaling speed, isn't necessarily going to be the speed that the belt is going around the uh, the front sprocket. So it'll be kind of a weird feeling, pedaling at one speed and seeing the belt, either flying way faster or even going slower if you're going up a hill or something. So that's
Yeah,
pretty interesting.
I wonder what it does for balance too, because you don't have that heavy either, cassette and derailleur in the back or an internally geared hub. So you've got a lot more, centralized mass there for,
Yep.
someone like me that I'm not like, a spandex kind of rider. I'm not sure I'd notice the huge difference, but people who really get nitty gritty probably will notice like, more central weight, and they might really feel that difference.
Yeah, I wonder if this is a new thing. You know, we'll see a lot more of these. I guess we'll find out. Moving on, SONDORS unveils MetaBeast 50-mile-per-hour e-bike and 75-mile-per-hour electric trail bike.
Yeah, so this is the one that you mentioned earlier, Seth. There's the MetaBeast and the MetaBeast X. The MetaBeast is so they're both on the first. They're on the same frame set, first of all, and they're kind of metacycle-ish in that they use a similar cast aluminum frame. So there's no weld lines or anything here. It's all cast out of one massive aluminum mold, I guess. I'm not sure if it's investment cast or how they do it actually, but you basically got one big chunk of aluminum there. It's got a smaller frame cavity than the Metacycle, so it looks a bit different. But that's because it's designed for a different type of riding. This is very much an like a dual sport off-road type bike, but it's apparently going to be homologated for street legal use as well. Right now, it's missing a lot of parts that are going to be important, like turn signals, reflectors, mirrors, all that stuff. So, these things generally look prettier in the concept images like we're seeing here than they do when they roll out in the end. The same thing happened with the Metacycle. But these are pretty cool vehicles. Between the two, the Meta Beast, God, there's so many names out there. The Meta
Mhm.
Beast is the sort of entry level one, 50 miles an hour. I think it's about 6 kilowatts, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe this was the 3,000 watt one. I think there's a table there. Try to
Yeah.
keep all these specs straight.
6 kilowatt on the smaller one, 18 kilowatt on the Beast X.
There you go. Yeah. So the smaller one, it's 50 miles an hour. It's really like we talked about Sur-Ron, Talaria kind of size and spec. But the MetaBeast X, this is the one that's really meant to be like a everyday commuter type motorcycle. So like you said, Seth, 18 kilowatts, that's something like 25 horsepower, 75 miles an hour. This is something that you could theoretically take onto the highway for short hops. You're not going to be doing long commutes on the highway, but if you live in the suburbs, you could certainly, get on the highway, get to the city, and then ride this in the city just fine. And depending how long your commute is, you might even be able to do that all on one charge. So, pretty interesting vehicles here. The price is also fairly attractive as well. There's promotional pricing that puts the MetaBeast at, I think it's so like 4,000, something like that, and then the MetaBeast X at 6,500. Though the MSRPs are a bit higher. I think it's 5,000 something for the MetaBeast and 8,500 for the or 8,000 for the MetaBeast X. So if you want to hop in and pay in full now, there's no like $100 deposit situation here. If you want to pay full, you get a pretty nice discount. But we should note that while they say that delivery is going to be in October, Saunders is kind of infamous for running pretty significantly past their delivery timelines. The same thing happened with the Metacycle. The same thing has happened with many of their e-bike rollouts, and they've gotten a bad
But
rap. A lot of people. Sorry, go on.
they do come out like we talked to Saunders a few weeks ago. Um, they always are late. They're always like slightly different than what you see originally, but they do deliver them, and people generally seem to be happy with what they get. But and we've already also talked about the Saunders try to go with an IPO, and that didn't work out, and there might be some financial things to think about if you're thinking about placing an order. Is this company going to be around? Obviously, we have no idea, but those are things to take into consideration when throwing down $4,500 or even 3,000.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like you said, that's totally fair. They always seem to come out in the end. And this one, I was like so debating on whether or not to put down a reservation myself. I was even like, which one of these do I want? Because I
Right,
watch so many of these launches, like come and go, and I want to be in that first group. But unlike the Metacycle, where it was just sort of a will they, won't they. Now it's a will they, won't they, and will they survive at the same time. So,
right.
I have a lot of faith in Saunders because I've seen them deliver time and time again, even if, they've been late. But with some of this financial speculation in the air, it just gives me a little more pause than it would have. And I think if there weren't those issues that we've talked about before, I probably would have already jumped in and like right after I finished writing the article about the launch, I would have put down a reservation. But
Yeah.
for now, I think I'm going to sit back a little bit and watch and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the specs, they're just so incredible. I mean, when I'm looking at the Beast and the Beast X, the weight alone at 123 pounds for the Beast and the 200 pounds for the Beast X. I mean, I feel like half of that has to be battery, and how do they keep the rest of it so low? And of course, like things change. Obviously, we don't know what the final specs are going to be, but this just seems like such a great bike and such a great price. $3,000, like the Meta Beast compares, pretty well to like, the Talaria from Luna we just talked about. But, Luna's got those things like in their warehouse ready to ship where this is, we haven't even seen like a real bike from Saunders, Meta Beast bike yet. these are all renders that we've seen. So um, it's just like one of those things. Like, how much are you willing to risk? How much are you, you know, you're risking a lot more money, but if they come through, you're getting a great bike for $3,000 or $4,500.
Yeah, absolutely. And weight, like you brought up, is one of those interesting things because that's a big change that we saw in the metacycle where they initially said it would weigh 200 pounds. And then by the time it rolled out, they said it actually weighs 300. And then when people got them and they put them on a scale, it weighed like 330 something. So
Yeah,
we'll see if this stays at 200 pounds.
yeah. I wouldn't bet the farm on that part, but exciting to see that come out. Hopefully, it makes it out, by the end of the year. One more. Here's why one startup is giving out 140,000 free electric motorcycles.
This one's exciting because it comes from halfway around the world. From you, Seth. I guess it's just a bit south from me here. But this is a not a Ugandan-based company, but a an African company that's starting operations in Uganda, where the country has made an announcement that they're going to give out free electric motorcycles to all motorcycle riders in the country in an attempt to significantly shift the most popular mode of transportation towards electrification. In Uganda, more people use motorcycles than cars. It's just a much easier way to get around in a lot of these cities. And so when the government announced that a few months ago, we were like, well, how's this going to work? How are you going to give out, like so many free electric motorcycles? Now we're finding out a little more detail. There's this startup, Spiro, that makes local electric motorcycles, and they've gotten funding from a basically an African sustainability group that has already put 50 million into them that basically allows them to produce these motorcycles, give them out to motorcycle taxi drivers. So these first 140,000 are going to go to taxi drivers, and then Spiro is going to earn revenue on battery swapping and charging stations that they're installing. And so I actually got a chance to talk to the company's CEO a couple days ago, and it's interesting because they describe themselves as wanting to be the sort of the Gogoro of Africa, and as opposed to just like rushing to launch a bunch of motorcycles, they've really developed their battery swapping as a key component of this, because the batteries that they're using, they only get about 60 kilometers or so of range, which is about 36 miles, I think. So not super long, but when you have swap stations all around, it doesn't really matter because you just roll in, some guy takes your battery and swaps it out for you. These are manual stations. They're not like Ogros where it's all like a vending machine. But still, I mean, that's a big part of this because you have these taxi drivers. I think they're called Bodos, if I'm not mistaken, and they basically just drive like all day. And to them, the most important thing is their daily cost. And so the CEO was telling me that, like, what they want to know is they don't care if it's green, they don't care about maintenance, they don't care anything. They want to know at the end of the day, like, how much money is in their pocket and how much they spent on fuel. And so if they spend significantly less swapping batteries than refilling at a gas station, then that's the most important thing to them. And that's what this startup is trying to do. And, it's interesting to see it happen on a countrywide scale as opposed to some of these smaller scale, citywide pilots we've seen or that sort of thing. This is like a whole country that is basically pushing all of their gas motorcycles out and replacing them with electric motorcycles in the span of a few years, which to me is kind of amazing.
Yeah, and what a great idea! Like, that we all know the cost of running an electric bike, motorcycle, car, whatever, is less than the gas equivalent on a fuel up basis. But this company actually plans to make their money on the fuel up, and theoretically, or very likely, the drivers will still be paying less for fuel than quotes uh, than they would be for gasoline or oil or whatever. And yet the company, there's still enough like margin there for them to make a profit on that, and the bikes are basically free, or very nominal cost. So I just love that idea. Seems like a really smart way to go. And the specs aren't bad at all. Like, these motorcycles are 6.5 kilowatts. They go 50 miles per hour and range of 56 miles. I mean, we were just talking, with SONDORS, and even with um, the Luna bikes, similar people are paying $4,500 or more for these kind of bikes. So pretty cool. I have to say, like, this is really impressive. Like, why won't this would work in the U.S. Obviously, we don't have motorcycle cabs or anything, but
I
like,
wish.
yeah, exactly. Um, it would be nice if there was like a Gogoro, light option, especially in cities for maybe scooters or even e-bikes. Like, there's so many. We need to do a couple things here. We need to like standardize our battery systems. It would be nice if that same battery worked for a Super 73 or a Juiced or whatever, or it would also work in any of the lawnmowers out there. That would be a good first start, and then you could just swap these batteries, at local stations throughout the work. Whatever, you wouldn't even need to have like a local charging. You could just put your bike down at the street level and zip around. So we need to get there. We're not great with infrastructure here, and like we're being shamed by Uganda, it looks like. So uh, good for them. Shame on us.
Yeah, we've got a few things to learn, don't we?
Yeah. All right. And the last one today is this guy bought a Chinese electric food truck from Alibaba. Sounds familiar. Here's what showed up.
So, if you guys are not familiar with my awesomely weird Alibaba electric vehicle of the week column, comes out each weekend. Basically, I find some super weird but pretty cool little electric vehicle that's made in China and like write up about why it's weird and cool at the same time. Every now and again, people actually buy the things that I find, and I always tell them like, "Don't buy this; it's a really bad idea." But that doesn't stop a few people, and this nice gentleman from Washington State decided to actually buy one of the little coffee trucks or coffee tuk-tuks, I guess, because it's like a three-wheeled food cart kind of thing. And it was quite an adventure because he started by having it customized, which is already pretty cool. That like you can buy one of these things and they'll paint it up however you want. That's his coffee company's logo on it, Walnut Nitro Coffee. He had it specked out the way he wanted. He's super tall, so it's got a hydraulic lift in there, so it like pops up so he can stand in there and like be a barista serving coffee. And he had it spec'd with like all the right equipment and the plumbing and the electrical he needed to run all of his stuff. He was going to use like a Jackery type portable battery generator, so he wouldn't need to have a gas or diesel generator running, so that both the vehicle and the coffee were both green in that sense.
Hmm.
So he had it all specced out, had it shipped from China, got it all loaded up and everything. When it arrived in the US, though, as uh, myself and others have discovered, the situation is not as rosy as it looks online. So when he got it, the hydraulic lift wasn't working. A bunch of the stuff inside was like pretty haphazardly connected. So he basically had to sort of gut it and rebuild it. So he replaced all the hydraulics. He had to change the plumbing and the wiring to get it up to Washington State code. But over a year, he did all that work. It was garaged. And then a year after he got it, he was able to get it titled as a motorcycle in Washington State. And now it's a fully functional coffee truck, basically. He named it Wally, and Wally drives around in Washington. I think it's in Seattle. I'm not exactly sure. And serves coffee. He also like rents it out. So if you have like a big event, he'll like drive up with his coffee cart. It's got a pretty minimal range. I think it's like 6 miles, so you can't go too far with it. But he said, when he's carrying like a whole bunch of kegs of water and coffee, like that's not doing the range any favors. So,
Right.
I kind of understand. I'm sure it wasn't spec with a big battery to begin with. The speed he said I think is like 20 miles an hour downhill. So, not a high performance vehicle by any stretch of the imagination. I have a similar structured vehicle, a like a rickshaw tuk tuk, and yeah, when you get that thing above like 15 miles an hour, you're hanging on for dear life. So I hope his has better suspension than mine. But all in all, like a pretty fun way to like live vicariously through someone who went on this adventure, risks some money to get something pretty neat, even if he had to do a lot of work and, put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to turn it into what he really wanted in the end.
Yeah, I love the finished product. Love to see these like everywhere. They seem very like simple and like obviously if anything goes wrong, there's probably parts on Alibaba as well. So, um, you know, so did he say that he got this from your post, or was this just another?
Yeah, so he actually emailed me after I posted one of these like three-wheeled food trucks,
Hmm.
and he was like, "Hey, I've like been looking for one of these." He's been following the column, and he asks if I chose that one for any specific reason. I was like, I liked the color and it looked weird. Like that's
Right.
why I just so like don't like buy just that one because I wrote about it. So I think he like continued looking around for a while. He's actually bought stuff on Alibaba before for other business stuff, so he kind of is familiar with the process. He's not
Hmm.
like a total noob at this, so that was good. Like again, just disclaimer, I don't recommend anyone, especially if you haven't bought from China before, to like hop in and buy a vehicle as your first thing. This is like there's a lot of issues that come up. So he at least knew the process, and I guess he shopped around to find someone that he felt comfortable with to choose this one in the end.
And the logo, the walnut nitro coffee, it looks like they did that in China.
Yeah, yeah, they did it. They customized it all for him the way he wanted.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he
And
um he didn't tell me how much it cost. He said it was about a fifth of buying an Italian food truck,
okay,
which I'm not exactly sure how much an Italian food truck costs, but his summary was basically like, he's glad he did it, but people should know going in that like you can't expect to spend a fifth of an Italian food truck and get an Italian food truck. So keep that in
right.
mind.
Yeah, and I see in this image, there's like a heavy duty plug there.
Oh yeah,
So
he had to
I'm not
redo all the electrical to like get it up to Washington code.
right. Well, it looks like a fun project. Obviously, this is a little DIY thrown in with the and a little bit of logistic uh, expertise as well. Um, so awesome project. Let me move on here to some of the comments here. Get rid of this guy. All right. There's no point in getting a motorcycle with insurance bike payment when an e-bike more or less does the same thing. That's something we should have also discussed about Los Angeles. Obviously, in the past, if you wanted something to ride around in and didn't want to pedal a lot, motorcycles or mopeds were your only option. These e-bikes, especially the more powerful ones, you don't need a license. And I think the local law people are pretty much happy to see, within reason, like e-bikes, especially, like Super 73s, um, those style of e-bikes, like much rather have those on the road than huge cars. So, nobody's like, is this 750 watts? And I think, when you see a bike that, has good branding of a brand, you're less likely to say, is this tricked out or whatever. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for cities, I absolutely agree. Like, you just don't really need the power or speed of a motorcycle. When you're talking about commuting between cities, that's where, to me, the motorcycle becomes worth it to avoid needing a full four-wheeled vehicle. And then, like in LA, I don't know LA as well as you do, but I feel like if you're in like just Santa Monica, like an e-bike's fine. But if you want to go from like Santa Monica to Malibu, like maybe that would be tricky, right?
I mean, those two, you pick two places that are next to each other, but
Oh, are
if you
they
wanted to
close?
go to, if you wanted to go Santa Monica to like downtown LA, you would probably want a motorcycle of some sort, or they have uh, light rail now, so you could take that. But yeah, yeah, e-bikes aren't good for long, bigger interstate or bigger inner city commutes. But they're fantastic. I mean, most people like you don't go shopping, downtown LA. You don't go like people who live in Santa Monica kind of live in Santa Monica. They don't go to the other parts of the city, and they certainly don't go east of LA. So yeah, you really don't need living around here. You don't need a car uh, if you have an e-bike, and obviously the weather here is great. And with with an e-bike, the hills are no longer really an issue. And as Raven mentions, like it's so much cheaper without the licensing, the fees, um, parking. Like there's a lot of stuff that you're saving money on, insurance, etc. All right, Carl in San Diego. Best way to understand these pricey big battery or fast bikes is a car replacement. Then big investment in these or cargo bikes isn't so hard to swallow. Yes, exactly. We've talked about this in the past. Like, a $3,000, $5,000 bike makes no sense if you're just pedaling around the neighborhood and also have a car. But if you are going on longer trips, if you're replacing a car, then all of a sudden, um, it doesn't make quite as much. Or.
Yeah, it's like the European mentality, I think, that
Right,
like, they'll spend a lot more on an e-bike because either that way they don't need two cars, it's just a car and a bike, or they only need a bike. So to them, it's you're paying vehicle level prices, or maybe less than a car, but something much more than you'd spend on a Huffy because you're using it like a vehicle.
right. All right. A2 Racing has a question. Do you need a license for the tuk tuk?
Yeah, so he actually had to measure, like basically register it as a motorcycle. So in some states, you can have an enclosed motorcycle that doesn't require a license. I'm not sure how Washington is on that, but he probably needs a motorcycle license for it because it's registered as a motorcycle.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying something about making it Washington State standard motorcycles. Obviously, there's 50 different states with 50 different like sets of laws. So uh, figure out what your state is cool with. Maybe contact the local law enforcement and say, "Hey, thinking about getting this thing. Are you guys gonna pull me over?" Uh, so that is all the comments.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you guys found that episode interesting. We will be back in 2 more weeks from today with the next episode of the Wheelie Podcast. See you